Hello, I'm Liliane Grace, author of The Mastery Club and The Hidden Order. I've been on the personal growth path since I was a teenager. I've got a particular interest in universal laws and living consciously. Having achieved some degree of success with my own personal development novels, I became frustrated when I seemed to hit an invisible ceiling. Someone suggested to me that perhaps I wasn't destined for greater success in my chosen field, and that thought kind of lodged in the back of my mind. So I decided to interview some experts on this topic of destiny. The experts that I chose to interview are Dr. John DeMartini, internationally renowned behavioural specialist, Dr. Rosemary McCallum, another highly qualified expert in the field of human behaviour and metaphysics, Maggie Kerr, psychologist and an astrologer with a background in business, Greg Moore, a counsellor and story editor, and Donna Goddard, an author and spiritual counsellor. The questions that I asked them were these. For those of us on the personal or spiritual growth journey, we often hear the expression that we create our reality, but do we really? How much of our lives are we creating consciously and how much unconsciously? How much from our soul and how much from our ego or personality? Is there such a thing as destiny or fate? Are our lives predetermined, or do we have some influence? What role does luck play? What about the stars? When the beautiful futures we've been envisaging for ourselves don't eventuate, is that because they're not our destiny? For how much of our lives are we on track? Can we ever know our true life purpose? Well, their answers are fascinatingly different. Each interview lasts about half an hour and it's well worth the time. But if you prefer to read, at the end of this interview, you will find an opportunity to purchase the entire Destiny interview series for a low price from Amazon, or you can download the ebook version for free from my website, lilianegrace.com. The ebook version includes a 6th bonus interview with Marvin Oka, who is a specialist in the field of behavioural modelling and generative learning and an inner work coach for transformational leadership. This first interview is with Greg Moore, a counsellor, shaman and story consultant. Greg has spent most of his life studying metaphysics and spiritual laws. He and I have known each other for quite a few years now, and we've had many interesting conversations over that time. He's played a thought-provoking role in my evolutionary journey, and I was interested to hear what his answers would be to some of those questions. Well, so welcome, Greg.
Good morning.
So I reckon let's start by defining some terms. So how do you define the soul and soul purpose?
I think I define purpose as a greater than soul dynamic. I think if I look and I go for a walk and I look at a tree or a bird or something like that, I see purpose at work. In other words, the acorn that becomes the oak tree is nature's purpose at work. So purpose in that sense permeates everything. Yeah, and so in that case, we're always responsive to, if you like, a force that's greater than us. That also has a soul quality, which is more a personal level. The soul, I would see, is my higher self, an intricate part of my evolutionary journey, a guide through my lifetimes, a resonance and energy that is present, not always easy to connect to, but always present, guiding me through the journey of life in order for me to learn and grow. So purpose and soul are different things. Yeah.
Okay. So something we've talked about that you've said to me is that part of our spiritual task is to put aside the sort of the ego and to ask God or Spirit what he, she, it, wants for us in our life, right? So how do we know what God, Spirit is saying to us, and which of our personal goals should be pursued or which not? How do you understand that?
Okay, we've got an hour to answer that one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
No.
Let's start with some basics here in terms of how do we know? I think one of the most important things in terms of our spiritual journey, and this is not new, this is really age-old, is the consistency of some kind of practice. Yeah? So in other words, your spiritual journey, I think, is springboarded by the practices that you have. So how do you know? It's really, for me, it's about listening. But how do you listen? Yeah, so listening is, I would think, the most significant part of any spiritual journey. Yeah, and by listening, you get an understanding, yeah, of what's right for you. Now, do you put your ego aside? Do you put your personality aside? And then I think your personality is the vehicle that your soul resonates through. So you don't actually want to ignore that or put it aside. I think it's more about integrating your own personal desires, but listening to what your higher self is saying, or listening to what the deeper goals are. So if you've got a goal to become an Olympic swimmer, yeah, it might be personality driven and it might be soul driven. Yeah, they can be a combination of both. It's really about trusting, the deeper aspect of yourself. And every person's path is different. So what is soul for one person is obviously going to be not for another person. So understanding where your journey comes, I think, starts with your daily practices, of which listening is the major one.
Okay. So with that goal to be an Olympic swimmer, or whatever,
yes,
you might continue pursuing that goal while that at a deeper level you feel that really is resonant with your path.
Yes. It can also be a personality desire. So you can be wanting to be an Olympic swimmer or a great teacher or a musician, and your spiritual path runs next to that. So that's the tricky part. You can be engaged in something that's really meaningful to you and has an energy for, and your own spiritual development may be through that, but it also may be quite different from that. So the person who is a great musician, that's like a soul energy, a quality. I think soul incarnates into us through different qualities. So the things that we're passionate about and really good at are likely to be soul aligned. Our spiritual development, however, that might be just the gifts that we are given. Our spiritual development might be quite different and quite challenging. So there's always a balance between soul and personality, and I think that's the task to achieve, is that balance. So if you're a good musician and that's one of the gifts that you've been given and you pursue that, but in other parts of your life you might have trauma or challenge or you need to go deeper, which is perhaps the difference between your soul goals and your soul learning. Soul learning, is likely to be activated mostly through your shadow or your difficulties or your challenges in life. So being soul aligned in terms of direction and career and expression doesn't mean an exemption from a whole host of soul challenges.
So this relates a lot also to the conversations we've had about the difference between goal and need. So that you can have a particular goal for your life, something you're aiming to achieve, but your soul's agenda is the need, what you need to achieve for your development.
Yes, what you need to learn. My experience is that we, generally speaking, only need to learn one or two things at a soul level, but it facilitates itself or plays itself out in many sort of different fields or in different layers of it. Your learning might be to let go the fear of injustice, for example. So you're going to attract, injustice and justice, a whole host of different perspectives on that through your lifetime in order for you to clear or understand that particular learning. You might have a learning about trusting your intuition. So you could be a great musician but not trust your intuition. So that's the interplay between quality and learning. So there's a difference between soul quality and soul learning. And usually your karma, if you like, we'll get onto that subject at some point, your karma plays out more likely through your soul learning than through your soul quality.
All right, well, since you've gone there, it was on my list of questions, but since you've gone there...
I thought it might have been. We've done that one before, so let's do it again.
Talk about karma, like how do you define karma and expand on that a little bit, and then we'll go to the question of destiny.
Okay, karma's kind of been around for centuries, obviously, and it's sort of it's trying to get itself an update as we progress through a more, the common thinking around karma these days, I think, is shifting. But in its essence, it's simply cause and effect. So cause and, what we cause, we affect from what we cause, or we cause things to become effects, and those things have consequences. Karma is often thought to be, like a punishment for what you've done wrong. In other times, instant karma, as John Lennon would say. You either get it straight back, and it's either good or bad depending on what you've done. And while it's probably true, it's a little bit simplistic. I see karma as the developmental cycle, and an opportunity to learn that which you haven't learnt in previous times. And so the nature of karma is that it lines up with your soul learning. So your soul's not going to come in and give you a learning that's not linked to your karma. And I think that's the important thing about it. It needs to be seen as your opportunity. And it can feel like a trap. It can feel like an opportunity, but it's almost likely to be always present somewhere.
Okay, great. That's all really good, really interesting, meaty stuff. Thank you.
Okay.
So, all right, so destiny, right? So this idea that our futures are predetermined or something, do you agree? How would you define destiny?
Okay. It's an interesting topic. I probably don't use the word destiny very often. I would be more likely to use the word alignment. Mm-hmm. So what is, and are you in tune with your alignment is perhaps the way that I would think. And if you are, then you could say, yes, my destiny is unfolding. That's kind of the way I think about it. Having said that, alignment needs to be in somehow, linked to a greater purpose. And I think everybody has a greater purpose, a purpose that is, has that level of alignment to the deeper self or the higher self. And a greater purpose doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing. It's just the thing that helps you understand where you are in the universe. And I think that's as much an indicator that you're on the right track. So are we creating that destiny? If you're living an authentic life, you probably are. But does that authenticity live before you, or you were finding it, or you were creating it? So there's a kind of a catch-22 here. I like to think of it as co-creation, which is if you're in line with what your true learning is or what your authenticity is, the things that you create in life are more likely to have that higher level of resonance, of which you can then say, this is my destiny. So it's almost like if you've got a true north sense of who you are, what your place in the world is, or what your place in the universe is, then I think you're a co-creator. You're co-creating. The interesting thing about co-creating is that we tend to perhaps simplify it by thinking, well, I'm a co-creator because I'm manifesting something. Mm-hmm. So manifestation and co-creation and evolution are different things. So co-creating, for one thing, is co-creating with your soul. So if your soul's got at least half the journey here, maybe it knows a little bit more about it than we do. So we might be attempting to create something, of which is not aligned to our soul learning. It's going to be a struggle. It gets hard, at that particular point in time. We also think that, I think the simplistic viewpoint is that co-creating or creating our destiny means that we're going to have a good time. We're going to get what we want, which is not necessarily true. I think that's the confusion between destiny and manifestation is fairly easy. It's a kind of a trap to fall into. And the laws of manifestation and the laws of evolution, I think, are different. They're different things. They're different sentences. So what you create with your soul, or your destiny, may be different from, or what you want with your destiny might be different from what your soul has in mind for your evolution. So it's a complex kind of, they're more like spokes on the wheel, really. Now there's the spoke of soul alignment, there's the spoke of personality, quality and desire. There's an overlay with manifestation, the laws of, I'm attracting this into my life in order to appease some goal, and then there's karma. So there's that wheel of life, and I think that's the nature of destiny, is the acceptance of that wheel as it turns. And it's not, sometimes destiny is going to be uphill. It doesn't mean you're off your destiny. And sometimes it's going to be, at ease. You might work really, really hard for 4 or 5 years to achieve something at a personality level. Let's say you want to be a great cook. You can understand that that's going to take you 5, maybe 10 years to become a really good chef. Now, I don't think the soul works any differently from that. Your destiny, usually means a lot of work at some level. Whether you've done, so it's not. Destiny doesn't mean given. I think we have a misapprehension. Is my destiny this is given to me, that it comes my way. Well, I think the co-creation aspect of it is you put your effort and your consistency in, and then your soul aligns that to what your learning and your development is, and then it shows up. So how do we know when we've got our destiny moving? Things of passion, things of synchronicity, things of love and beauty, those kind of things, ease, connection, those kind of things tend to indicate at some point we're in line with our destiny.
Yep, okay. So things flow when we're on track with that.
Things flow when we're on track, but I think the important thing to see here is that it's also cyclic. Destiny and soul and incarnation is a cyclic phenomena. So things do flow, but just because they're not doesn't mean that we're not on track. Right, so that's because you'll always have periods of, I think we always have periods of incubation and periods of resistance, which forces us to go deeper.
Okay, so how would somebody know if they are in a period of incubation where things are not flowing just because they're being sent inside to examine, or things are not flowing because they're actually way off track, out of resonance, out of alignment?
Yeah, core question, that one.
Yes,
all right?
yes, okay.
A really good question, yeah. I think we go back to the opening sentence. It comes back to your practices.
Okay.
Right? So because everything else is cyclic and it's up and down and the dynamics are confusing, and sometimes something shows up because you need to follow it, and sometimes it shows up because you're resisting it, or you just need to learn something, or the timing's not right. So how do you judge which one of those is what? How do you know which spoke of the wheel is resonating at any particular time? And we know that through consistency. In other words, if we have a consistent practice, we do this every day or 5 out of 7 days, and we rely on that practice to provide the consistency in a world, in a cyclic experience. So without that consistency, I don't think we can read the signs correctly. So if you show up every day, or most days, for a spiritual practice of some kind, and that can be meditation or yoga or prayer or walking, whatever it is that resonates with you, and you use that time both as your time of connection, of gratitude to spirit, whatever that looks for you, and you're listening, then you get a bit of a download to understand where the spoke of the wheel is. And I think it's the most essential part of any spiritual journey, is around consistency. It's the offset to the upheaval and the confusing information that we get at any other time.
Okay, so that the teachers who are out there saying master your destiny,
yes,
how would you respond to them? How would you relate to that phrase?
How would I relate to that? I mean, that's fine. I don't have an issue with it. I think it's an invocation really to aspire to being who you are, the greatness that you can be. Yep. So in terms of that, I think it's fine. It's not a language that I would use. I would more likely use find your authentic alignment. Does it really matter which language we use? Probably not. But I think it is about understanding that you have a journey, and that, you know, to aspire to the greater aspect of yourself is really, really important. There's another thing here that I kind of want to add also, is that I think sometimes we lose the plot on what spiritual attainment is.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
I think too easily we are either hard on ourselves or overly perfectionist, or trying too hard in order to achieve something spiritually that is measured by the world. Yeah, and so often these days we are measuring spiritual attainment by what we're manifesting.
Okay, yep.
Right, so if I've manifested the new car or the relationship, or it tells me that I'm spiritually evolved, or that I am evolving. And I think it's somewhat astray. You know, perhaps 50 years ago we would have measured spiritual attainment by virtue. Mm-hmm. So it's a very different story. We would perhaps have measured spiritual attainment by compassion or kindness, or our contribution to others. Yeah. And I think it's one of the things that's getting a little bit lost in the rhetoric. Mm. So, you know, the mother who, you know, drops off her children every morning and stays behind to work in the canteen, you know, is that as a significant piece of spiritual involvement as somebody who's manifested a relationship? Well, yes, it probably is. Mm.
I think actually we're starting to see a little bit of a coming back of that in education, with the work on character and values that people are wanting to bring into schools and education. We're just starting to see, I think, a beginning there.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think we too often lose our values in the quest for spiritual attainment. Mm.
Mm. I'm doing, you can see from my eyes here, I'm doing a quick skim of questions. And okay. I feel like, you know, you've answered a lot of the questions I was going to ask you.
Sure.
Already. So I feel like we've just about done it. I would love to ask you, actually, because I've never asked you this properly, Greg, of all the years of our interactions and conversations, because I remember you've said to me you've got a background in shamanism, and just how does that figure in with this? What does that mean to you, and what is that practice?
Well, we're just getting some. Shamanism, I think, is a universal term to designate the process of change. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're all shamans in some point or another. We're all sort of asking that we use ourselves as a catalyst for something to be different. You know, when you sort of parenting, you're being a shaman. Yeah, when you're healing, you're being a shaman. Where I think it resonates with me is when you're consciously using a ritual or a format or a framework, to either shift your consciousness, or bring about change. Mm-hmm. So a group facilitator is a shaman, using process and symbolism or knowledge to generate a journey of evolution. So for me, I would say my shamanism comes into my individual work mostly, where we might use meditation or symbolism or a process to move from the current state of awareness to a new one. So that's the simplicity of it. Often in shamanism, and we haven't looked at this one, the person needs to, both the practitioner and the recipient, generally speaking, needs to confront their shadow somewhere. Mm. So we haven't talked about shadow today.
I'm glad you said that. I was about to say, yes, let's talk about shadow.
All right. So just finishing off on the shaman one, is it's a process of a shift in consciousness, or if you like, behaviour. So a ritual is that. A prayer is a form of shamanism. When you ask, you use words, you use language to invoke something different, to bring about change in consciousness. A meditation can be a shamanistic meditation. Now, there's classical or traditional shamans of indigenous people, and it's a fairly, expansive piece of knowledge there that they're working from. But it's also quite simple, yeah. So if we have a look at the shadow,
Yes,
yeah,
come on, let's
well,
do the shadow. Come on.
kind of let's dive into the dark stuff.
Yes.
I like to refer back to storytelling for the shadow, right? And if we all see that we're the hero in our own journey, yeah. And so in storytelling or in movies, our hero is always confronted by something that they don't yet understand.
Yes.
Yeah, and then and in the quest to understand what confronts them, which is life, yeah, they'll come against their own weakness or their own blind spot. Yeah, their own. Yeah, in classical terms, in Shakespearean terms, their fatal flaw.
Yep.
Yeah. So the fatal flaw is simply the part of yourself that you're not aware of, yeah, but plays out in your life, and it brings you challenges. If we go back to our earlier conversation, it's your fatal flaw, or the hero's fatal flaw, is likely to be where your karma sits. So your karma and that aspect of your unconscious sit in the same place. And so life brings you circumstances that challenges you to bring that part of yourself into the light. So it doesn't necessarily, shadow doesn't necessarily mean bad. Shadow just means something that hasn't yet received light. So it can be simply something that you're not aware of. Yep. Yeah, something that, yeah. So for an example, you might be very good at, be a really, really good organizer. Yeah, and but your shadow's lurking somewhere in the fact that you don't trust your intuition. So you overcompensate with knowledge and facts and figures to take your journey in life. Yeah, at some point, yeah, your facts and figures are not going to deal with what presents. You're going to have to trust another part of yourself. That's what I understand the shadow to be. Yeah, I mean, it can get darker and it can get lighter. It can be, steeped in shame, which is often the place that people will find their shadow, is in shame, yeah, and shame is often hiding something that is sometimes very precious, yeah. So it's in the uncovering of those things within yourself that you bring light to the unknown.
Can you give an example of that, where the shadow is actually something precious, where the shame is actually something precious?
Okay, it's a tricky one, but that's kind of, if we go back to Johnson, it's kind of called the golden shadow. So as a child, for example, you might have a secret that you've been keeping to yourself for years that you really want to do, and you know that you're good at it, but for some reason you don't believe in yourself. Yeah, so you take a path which is opposite to that. Let's say you're a poet in your heart, yeah, and but you don't have any confidence in that. Yeah, so one of the things that you do is you override that part of yourself, and you take a different path. You might become a computer expert. You might move into computers. So your path takes you away from the quality. Yeah? And as you do that, as you move down that, if you like, wrongful path, then you accumulate more and more and more baggage, or more and more lessons. Yeah. That is, and pain comes out of that. So you go and do a job, and you apply for a job as a computer technician, and you get the job, but nothing works. You get hurt. So in other words, you start to compound, on top of something that's hidden within you. Yeah? And so eventually, life colludes, to stop you. Until you actually go back and go, okay, there's something that I've left behind within myself, yeah? And now I've got all of this shadowy stuff, all of this shame that surrounds it. So I'm going to have to kind of try and get through that to find what that is. And I think that happens a lot with people. We leave behind, particularly from our childhood, we leave behind, those things that are special to us, because we've not had the environment to support it, or because we haven't had a confidence or a trust in it. And so at some point we're ashamed that we didn't trust ourselves. Self-trust is a really significant part of dealing with the shadow.
Great, thank you. It's all very, as ever, you're always very thought-provoking, Greg. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah. So, last two questions then. The role of luck or serendipity. Do you believe there is any such thing as luck, or do you think everything is that there are no such thing as coincidence and luck and so forth, but it is all sort of designed at some level, or orderly at some level? So that question first.
Okay, so I simply call it divine order.
Yep.
Right, so everything resonates to divine order because everything resonates to purpose. So I'll just go slightly sideways, is that life force, that's the force of life itself, holds purpose. Yeah, so again, the acorn becomes the oak tree because it resonates with life. Yeah, and all life has an order to it. So nature has, although we're doing our best to kind of destroy that, life has its own order, simply because the sun rises and it sets, and the universe moves within its own order. So everything has that. So everything has the potential to be synchronistic. So I think when we are experiencing synchronicity, we're experiencing what is always there, but we don't always see it.
Yeah. But when you say we're going against the laws of nature, we're destroying things, so that's actually out of divine order then. That's an area where divine order is not
reigning. I would say it's just not very good common sense, really. So, where does common sense and divine order kind of combine? But, I mean, this is a tricky one. Some people would say it's divine order for us to destroy this so that we can learn not to. It's a really hard way of going about it. So it's certainly not something I would promote. So, I guess I don't necessarily know the answer to that. I think if we are in harmony with the natural forces of life, we're more likely to experience synchronicity.
Yep. Fantastic, thank you. All right, so last question, Buckminster Fuller. So he tells the story he talks about the principle of precession, and he explains it in the context of the honeybee that is travelling kind of this way looking for nectar. So it's on its own purpose in a sense. But at a 90-degree angle, as it's going one way looking for its nectar, at a 90-degree angle, its feet or whatever are spreading pollen. So it's pollinating the plant. So Buckminster, the way this was expressed to me many years ago was that Buckminster Fuller was saying that the law of precession is telling us that our true purpose is actually at a 90-degree angle to our perceived purpose. So what we're actually here to achieve is always going to be outside of our awareness, because as soon as we move that way, it moves that way too. So we can never actually see it. So how do you respond to that principle? What are your thoughts about that?
Okay. I mean, it's the first time I've heard it, so I'll just kind of take it in for a minute. Generally speaking, I would say yes. I kind of would agree with that. Can we actually ever know our purpose? I would think we can be aligned to it. I hear what you're saying is as we pursue life, there's a greater service that we can do. In other words, that there is always service that we can do to the greater. And that may be contrary to what our personality desire is, or what we think that we're doing. And then therefore there's a collective consciousness that we serve as well. And I would agree with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Not sure I answered that question. Okay.
Well, I was presenting that honeybee thing to you for the first time, so...
Yes. It's an interesting one. Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Yes. I would say that to understand your true purpose is part of your true goal in life.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the real quest, really, is why are we here? It's an age-old question. Who am I and why are we here?
Yeah.
It's been a Zen question for forever and ever. I think we never really get that far from it.
So is there, all right, one more question now. Is there, to what extent do we have a soul purpose that is and to what extent a personal purpose? How do they fit together? Because it seems to me that everyone shares a soul purpose of learning to love the whole, for instance, to love and appreciate the whole, and
Yeah,
spirit
okay.
and each other and so forth. We might say that we all have that as a soul purpose, as a human purpose, shall we say?
I think that's a universal spiritual purpose, yes.
Yeah, okay. So that would be, yes. Whereas the soul purpose is then more personal to your journey.
I think your soul purpose is more personal to your journey and to your karma. So the universal purpose is what we collectively all need to be able to contribute to our evolution and the well-being of our planet, and that's pretty obvious when that can take place by simple kindness or by becoming an environmental activist, whatever your contribution is. Okay, I think your soul purpose is more individualized in that, but if you're on track with it, it's likely to be from your soul purpose is the natural place that you'll contribute to the world or to your environment, so they align. Your soul purpose it can be quite simple sometimes. It can be about trusting yourself. It can be about holding a point of integrity. Yeah, it can be about speaking up. It could be about finding your voice. It could be about understanding parenting. I think one of my soul purposes I would never have, in my teenage years and early adult years, I would never have thought that being a parent was important as part of my soul journey. It's just something you either do or you don't do. I didn't have a great desire to be a parent. But I think without necessarily becoming a parent, I think I needed that in order to understand suffering and understand limitation. Prior to that, I think I was far too idealistic. So I've parented one of my own children and step-parented 3. I've needed that at the soul level so that I can understand humanity from within that framework. Is that my soul purpose? It's been part of it.
So there can be lots of levels and aspects to it.
Yeah. And so I think what I would suggest is that we don't put too much glamour on soul purpose. We can see it as being a glamorous thing, something that is, inspirational and inspiring to everybody. And yes, it can be, but it's also very simple. I think I told you the story about the guy that I met in India. We'll finish on this one. Yeah. So I'm going to just do this one again.
Yep.
First time in India, arrived in Delhi at midnight and booked into a hotel, and there's this guy sweeping the courtyard, and for some reason he came up to me and he said, "I have a good life this time. I have a family. I have a job. I am grateful for my karma." Right, and he was in his purpose, and he was probably the most enlightened person I saw in India.
Yeah,
he was at one with his place in the universe. And I still remember him.
Yeah, that is a beautiful story, a beautiful note on which to conclude this interview. Thank you, Greg, as ever. Really interesting, thought-provoking. How can people reach you if they would like to, if something you've said here speaks to them and they'd like to make contact?
Probably through email, I think. You've got that. I think you can give that out if somebody wants to, yes.
All right, will do. I'll provide that email address. So if anyone wants to be in touch with Greg, please contact me, Liliane, at themasteryclub.com, and I will provide you with Greg's email details. Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you to Greg Moore for sharing your thoughts about soul and destiny and life purpose and creating our reality. I've taken a few notes. So I think Greg makes a very important point when he says that we have today confused spiritual attainment with manifesting, when in the past it used to be defined in terms of spiritual virtues or qualities. And also when he talks about the importance of a consistent spiritual practice. I love the idea of the golden shadow, those qualities, those positive qualities that we've repressed, and that part of our life journey is to reclaim them. I'm interested in Greg's comment that we really usually only have 1 or 2 key things to learn during the course of our life. It reminds me of something I learned years ago from NLP, that each person has a virtual theme running through their life. And I agree with his acknowledgement that while there's a lot of pressure to have a very big and glamorous life purpose, it's just as honourable to have a simple life purpose. I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Greg Moore. and gain something for yourself. If you'd like to read the ideas shared in this and the other interviews, you can download a free ebook of the entire Destiny video series from my website, lilianegrace.com, or purchase it for a low price from Amazon. The ebook includes almost verbatim transcripts of the 5 video interviews, plus a bonus 6th interview with Marvin Oka, who is a specialist in behavioural modelling and generative learning. Thank you for watching and listening. Create yourself a great year.